Episode 13. Here we go. So our hero's black. Playing a real Lopez. Okay, so this move by white's a little odd. Normally, in 95% of the cases, you'd move your bishop back here. The idea is that you want to still keep pressure on this knight. And now basically it's kind of transposed into a Gioco piano, which is characterized by e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. But notice black has gained a tempo with this move a6. And because of that, this is actually a bad version of the Gioco piano, because black basically has an extra tempo with this a6, and it's actually useful because sometimes you might want to play b5 in one move and develop your bishop to b7. So this is good for black, and so black just makes some normal developing moves. And now the normal Gioco piano move would be bishop c5, and would be a good move. But what black plays is perfectly fine. Bishop e7, it's solid. Castle, castle. h3, okay, I'm not sure that white needs to make this move. Probably development was superior, because now after black plays d5, black is slightly better. Basically, black is playing white in this game, because he's kind of gained two tempi. One from this bishop b5, c4, and one from this h3 that doesn't really do much. So after take, 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 take. Okay, so black has a centralized queen. He has the further advanced center pawn. He has the two bishops. Really, nothing bad can be said about black's game. His game is very nice. Okay, so let's see what happens. Knight c3. Okay, so this is black's first kind of question. Obviously, white has a dire threat, which is knight takes queen. So the question is, where should black move his queen to? Any suggestions? Any good squares? So, so it's not terribly important where the queen goes, but I think the best square is actually the square d6. Point is, on d6 you have the most scope because you're looking this way. Notice you also have the whole 6th rank on which to operate. You're also defending this pawn a second time. So I'd say d6 is most probably the best square, because oftentimes it'll end up on g6, and then on g6 you're kind of ready-made to start pushing your f-pawn and also threatening stuff like bishop takes h3. And notice this bishop is also hitting h4, so the queen can't really be bothered anymore once it hits g6. But on d6 it's kind of centralized and controlling the whole board. So d6 is definitely the most natural square. What black played isn't terrible, but he has to be a little careful. So black played queen a5. It's a natural square for the queen in the Scandinavian, where, you know, e4, d5, e d5, queen d5, knight c3, queen a5. But here it's a little worse because this pawn isn't going to be pushing forward anytime soon. And in the Scandinavian, black often plays c6 fairly quickly in order to give the queen a retreat. And also, even the fact that black has pushed this pawn a6 means queen a6 isn't even possible in some lines. But you know, if black's careful, he should be okay with queen a5. But I think d6 is definitely the superior square. So okay, rook e1, just attacking a pawn. Bishop e6, normal development. Bishop d2. Okay. b5. So now, unfortunately, this queen is giving black some problems. So most probably he should have gone like queen b6 or something, and kind of gotten it out of this discovery. Because after b5, how can white take advantage of this move? So this knight can hop anywhere it wants and uncover this bishop. So a good square for that knight would be knight d5. And now pretty much b4 is forced. And now notice that black has an overworked piece. And the overworked piece is this knight, because it's simultaneously defending e5 and e7. So white can simply play take, and now the knight has to recapture, and now there's two attackers, only one defender. So after rook takes e5, white's doing quite well. And that's all pretty much forced. Black can't really do anything to stop that. So b5 was a mistake. Let's see what white played. Knight takes e5. Okay. So white just goes in for winning the pawn immediately. This is not quite as good as knight d5, because knight d5 gets rid of this bishop, which is important. But it does win a clean pawn, because now notice this queen is not defending e5 anymore. Okay, so again in this position, black should probably play a move like queen b6, which defends this knight and gets the queen out of the discovery. And white would be better because he's up a pawn, but notice that black has some compensation because black has two bishops. And so if black puts his bishops on d6, he kind of aiming his bishops at the king. And it's similar to a Marshall gambit in the Ruy Lopez, but not as good for black. So he'd have a bit of compensation, but not really enough to justify a pawn. Not nearly as much as he would in the Marshall. But instead he took. And now, what should white do? Yeah, so rook takes e5 is of course natural. But actually white has a stronger move here, which is again this idea of knight d5. So after knight d5, again, notice how this queen is virtually trapped, so something like b4 is virtually forced. And now, what's the correct continuation here, guys? Okay, so knight takes e7, king h8, and then what? Well, rook takes e5, I can play a move like bishop d6, so be careful. Be careful. So, yeah, knight takes e7, check. King h8, and then the quiet move here, a3. Simply exploiting this. And so here black is probably forced to play a move like c5, but now notice what's happened. Well, now he can play rook takes e5. And sure, black can get his material back with queen c7, but notice that this is not good for black. Not good for black at all. So this would have been good for white, but of course he simply wanted to take back, which is fine. Okay, c6. And what should white play here? Well, he should play the same thing he should have done the first two times. Knight d5 again. And again, the idea is to take on e7 and get rid of this dark squared bishop. So, knight e2. Well, third time wasn't the charm, I guess. And so, actually black's okay here because now is a package delivered. Okay, so knight e2 was not the right move, because actually now black is somewhat okay, because his two bishops will give him enough compensation. Yeah, okay, so queen c7 and d4. Okay, so what should black play here? Okay, so we want to improve the scope of this bishop. So what's the best square? Well, good square would be bishop d6. Then this rook has to move someplace, say rook e3. And now what should black do here? And now c5. And now notice that black's rooks are coming to these open files, and the two bishops are controlling a lot of real estate on the board. These bishops are doing quite well. But bishop d6 is an important finesse to gain a tempo, because the bishop is much better on d6 than it is on e7. So you want to make sure you gain tempi whenever possible. Okay, so black instead played c5. And what's the difference? What's the difference? You know, you may have heard, oh, well, you want to gain a tempo, and thought, wow, what's the big deal? But there actually is a big deal. So the real reason bishop d6 was so important is because in this position, white actually has the possibility of playing this move, knight to f4. And all of a sudden, it's getting tricky. All of a sudden, it's getting tricky. Because we're threatening knight takes e6. And we also might want to play a move like knight d5. In either case, we're kind of getting rid of the bishop. So, and if pawn takes pawn, maybe rook takes e6 is even possible. So, again, bishop d6 would have been a better choice for sure. But okay, white plays bishop f4. And now, what should black play? Well, it looks tempting to play bishop d6 because we're skewering the bishop, but unfortunately, bishop d6 does not work because of rook takes c5. And now we're exploiting the fact that this bishop is pinned to win material. So bishop d6 is not the correct answer, which is why we should have played bishop d6 2 moves ago. But instead, black actually did notice this, and so played rook a d8. Well, he didn't notice enough, unfortunately, because white can win here. How does white to move win? Well, it's pretty simple. This bishop is defended, and anywhere the rook moves, the queen will be attacked, so we can just do whatever we want with this rook. So we want to take a piece. Rook takes e6, and black can resign. So in this position, black would have had to move his queen out of the discovery. So maybe a move like queen b6, targeting d4, and then if pawn takes, he can play bishop takes or something. But after rook d8, he's actually lost. Fortunately for him, though, white did not see this either. Rook takes c5 is also good, but not as good as winning a piece. So he played c3. So white was more concerned about defending his own pawns than he was about winning pieces. And now black plays pawn takes pawn, which does nothing to stop rook takes e6. It still wins the game. Because again, we're threatening the queen, it's more important than anything else. But white is not going to see it once, so he's not going to see it twice. Just took back with the pawn. Now bishop f6. And now this move basically forces white to win the game, right? I mean, now rook takes e6 wins again. And now white has to notice that his rook is being attacked, so black basically forces white to win the game. Let's see if he indeed wins the game. Nah. So he was forced to win the game, he declined. And now black's okay. Because this pawn is weak. And again, 2 bishops, so. Alright. So, interesting question in this position. What should black do? What should black do? Move the queen somewhere. Okay. Where? Yeah, notice if you play queen b6 or queen a5, notice there's a bishop c7. A little bit of a fork here. So you don't want to move the queen on that diagonal. Where instead? How about this move? How about that move? Is that a good move or a bad move? Bad move? Good move? Good move? Bad move? Good? Okay, so if it's good, why is it good? If it's bad, why is it bad? Okay, so basically this is forced, right? Take, 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 take. That's the point. So evaluate this position. Is this good for black or bad for black? So material is even. Well, I mean, black is still down a pawn currently, but is this good for black or bad for black? Yeah, it's even, but does this help black or does this hurt black? Notice it's black's move in this position. Yeah, so the problem is that you can actually win your pawn back with either of these moves. But what's white's trump card in this position? Yeah, so notice that if you do something about the c-pawn, for example, you play rook c8, notice that here white has b4. And this pawn is probably worth more than anything that black has. And if you take a pawn, then notice this pawn gets to c7. And again, it's going to be worth more than anything black has. So it's probably a little premature to play queen takes c5. Probably a little premature. But okay, so black played queen a7, which was a good move, because after bishop c7, okay, what should black play here? So now, all of a sudden, all of white's pieces are a bit precarious. Notice you got this guy defending this guy defending this guy. We got this guy attacked twice. We got this guy attacking this guy. Got this guy attacking this guy. All these things are kind of defending each other in a very precarious way. So the best way to take advantage of this is to play this move, bishop takes d4. So the point is that if, say, bishop takes d8, well, then we simply take on c5, and then we're hitting this pawn. So white would have to play bishop h4, and here black is just better. And then if, say, knight takes d4, we take on c5, he has to take on d8, we take on d8. And now notice we win this knight. We win this knight because if knight takes e6, notice rook takes d1 as check, and then notice when we take back, we create Luft. So there's no back rank tricks. So I'll just show you guys what I mean, but so knight takes e6 looks like it might save the knight maybe. I mean knight b3 you just take with check anyway, but this looks like it may save the knight, but after take it looks like, oh, we're getting back rank mated if we take, but when we take, we actually create Luft for our king. So after rook d8 check, king f7, we're just winning. Okay, so bishop d4 would have been a good move, but black thought to move the rook. So he plays rook d5. Rook takes d4 would have also been okay, but not as good as bishop takes. So rook ac1, rook c8. And here, if white simply captures here and then moves his bishop, he'd just be up a pawn. Say it move like bishop e5 or something. But white likes to ride the carousel. And so plays this move, bishop a5. And now, all of a sudden, he's completely lost. He's completely lost. So how can black win the game here? Yeah. So notice that now this pawn, which is defending this rook, is in a precarious spot. It's pinned. So we have to try to exploit that pin. And the way we can do it is simply by taking on c5. But make sure we take with the correct rook. We need to make sure the pin is still intact. So we have to take with rook c takes c5. And then if rook takes c5, now we want to play queen takes c5. Because notice the queen is now completely undefended. So after queen takes c5, if d takes c5, rook takes d1, we're just up a full rook. And if he doesn't take back, we just move our queen out of the way, and we're up a full rook anyway. So, of course, black would see this and win the game. So rook takes c5, rook takes c5, and now black plays queen takes c5. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. Well, now it's a game again, because he's winning a pawn, but he's not winning the game. So, alright, well, it's a game again. Take. Take. Okay. Well, he's better. I mean, black is better. Not winning, but he's better. So why is black better in this position? Well, just ask which piece is better. So which piece is better? The queen on c5 or the queen on d1? Well, the queen on c5 is better. It's more centralized. What's better? The bishop on e6 or the knight on e2? Well, clearly the bishop on e6. First of all, it's attacking this pawn. Second of all, it's centralized and has good scope. This knight's kind of just sitting there. Knights are not very good in these types of positions with pawns on both sides of the board. In which case is better, this bishop on f6 or the bishop on a5? Well, clearly it's this bishop on f6. Bishop on a5 is on the side of the board, not doing anything. This bishop's targeting a pawn. So black has two bishops, centralized queen. Pawn structure is the same, so only black can be better. Alright. So white plays b4, attacks the queen. Queen d5. Good idea to trade queens, because this ending will be lost if queens are off. White obliges. And now black's almost winning, because this pawn is basically falling by force. If knight c1, bishop b2, and then bishop a3 to dominate the knight, and then you can take on a2. If a3, just bishop b2, again dominating the knight. These two bishops are monsters, and this bishop is stuck. So a3, bishop b2. Okay. Now, a little geometry is required. Where should black move this bishop that's being attacked? Hopefully after seeing enough of these, you guys can just find it second nature to move the bishop to the correct square. But yeah, again, the principle of domination. So we want to dominate this knight. So this knight has this square, this square, this square, this square. How can we take away all four simultaneously? Well, we can take it away with bishop c4. Now notice this knight is completely stuck. It only has one square it can go to, h5. But then from there, it can only really go to g3 and then e4. It's going to take a long time to get the knight back in the game. And this bishop is a monster. Not only is it dominating the knight, notice it's also preventing king f1. It's also an important point. So bishop c4 would have been the correct move. Bishop e7 doesn't make much sense. But black is still doing quite well, so he takes on a3. Bishop c6. Okay, where should the bishop have gone instead? Again, principle of domination. Always want to keep it 3 squares from the knight. So what square is 3 squares from the knight? 1, 2, 3. c8. Yep. So now the knight's dominated again, also defending this pawn. I'm not sure why he didn't keep this pawn defended, because now black allowed white to take. Okay, king f8 makes sense. He wants to get his king into the game, because now this pawn is going to be hard to win without the king in the game. But black's idea is going to be he's going to run his king to c4, then he's going to attack this knight with this bishop, and then he's going to use the bishop and the king in combination to win this b4 pawn. Okay, so g4 again, he should be running his king over as well. King e7, knight c5, king d6. Okay, black's doing the right thing, white's not doing the right thing. Okay, f6, good to stop knight e5 ideas. King d5, good. Okay, this is basically over. King c4, good. Okay, and now how does black finish the game? Again, like I said before, just have to root this knight out of a6. So bishop e7, knight c5, bishop c8, and then this pawn's falling by force. Notice the knight's still dominated, so we're just going to take this pawn, then run it. But black's technique was lacking, so he plays king d4, going the wrong way. Again, if he just wins this b4 pawn, it's over. Okay, now allowing white to kind of gain some counterplay. And now what should white play here? Always lurking counterplay. Always lurking. So now white actually has this cute idea, knight c5, king takes f4, knight e6. And now all of a sudden, black's pawns are fractured, and his king is far away from this pawn. So this knight's starting to rove. Once he takes here, he can go here, maybe try to take this, try to run these guys. But all of a sudden, it's getting a little hairy. But okay, king g3, not really best. g5,
check.
Knight c5, king d4,
Check.
knight e6, king c4, take. Whoops, take. Okay. So all of a sudden, white's generating some serious counterplay. Black here should probably take on g5. Because notice that this pawn is going to be faster than these two. Because this bishop is very good at stopping pawns, this knight not so much. But again, black should have never allowed this counterplay to begin with. But unfortunately, black plays this move, and now all of a sudden he's actually lost. After winning for the last 15 moves, he's actually lost here. What does white do to win this game? Yeah, simply take on b4, take on b4, and now simply g takes f6. And this is completely hopeless. Because f7's a threat. So black only has one move, which is to play bishop e8. And this is a win for white. So I'll show you what happened in the game. This is exactly what happened in the game. Take, take, king takes, take, and bishop e8. Okay, so this is winning for white, but how? What's white's idea here? So white's idea here is actually going to be to trade this knight for this pawn. And with his king close enough, it'll be a win because his king will be able to force promotion of this pawn, and then it'll be with these two pawns and this pawn versus a king on, say, f7 versus a king on, say, d6. And that's just going to be a win for white because white can win this second pawn by force. So the way to do that is knight c7. Okay, a fork forking this and this. Bishop moves somewhere. Say g6, f7, doesn't really matter. Okay, king f4. And now on king c4. So black's idea, of course, is to do this. But now this actually wins. Because this king is not close enough. So after king takes, king e5, king c6, king e6, this is a win for white. Because simply f7 and f8. So for example, king c7, f7, take, king d7, and this is a win. h5, I can just take it and promote. So if white had simply done that, he would have won the game. But not the easiest thing to see. So he plays g5. Still probably should be enough for a win after knight c5 anyway, or knight c7 anyway, but okay, king c4. But this one tempo that he played with g5 might actually cost him. So it could be closer to a draw. I'll show you a sample line that kind of proves that. It's kind of crazy, but knight g7, bishop g6, h4, b4, h5, bishop f7, g6, hg, h6, c3, h7, b2, h8 queen, a1 queen. And this might be close to a draw, actually. I mean, white probably still has some small chances because this pawn is so far advanced, but this queen ending is tricky. And this bishop and the queen might be able to generate some mating threats if white is not careful. But okay, that's a bit crazy. So bishop f7, it's still probably a draw with correct play. And now white plays this move, which cannot for the life of me fathom. I don't know, maybe he thought that after take he could play g6 or something and deflect the bishop off this diagonal, but he's way too slow. Like he needed this pawn on h5 or something to even attempt this, so I'm not sure. Maybe he forgot bishop's move forwards. I can't begin to explain why he played this move, but he did. And black wins. Still not the simplest though, because as I'll show you what happens in the game. So notice that this is impossible because of f7. So his trump card is this pawn. He has to keep pushing it. So okay, king d4 to stop king e5 was a good idea. Okay, h4. So probably simplest here is play bishop f7 first to stop h5 and then just run this pawn, but he runs the pawn immediately and it gets a little tricky because after take, b2, f7, queen, white queens, but what does black have here? Yeah. So unfortunately for white, he queened on a precarious square because this king and this queen are on the same file. So if we can somehow check the king, we can win the queen. And indeed, we can play queen to f1.
Check.
And then after the king moves, queen takes queen, and GG. So here, white resigned. But even though white just like hung a knight, he still managed to get a queen. Just was only able to keep it for half a move. So that's the first game on the playground today. Let's take a look at the second game. This one is going to be a little bit more interesting because it actually was from a tournament. So this was over the board. Both players had ample time to think. Let's see how it transpired. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. So now we're looking at another Ruy Lopez, but this time from the white side. So far, no issues. Knight f6, okay, a Berlin. Castle, knight takes e4, okay, open Berlin. Not the lose a pawn Berlin that we saw previously, but simply an open Berlin. Rook e1, good move. Okay, so now for you opening theoreticians, what is black supposed to play here? What is black supposed to play here? So the correct retreat for black is to retreat this knight to gain a tempo and play knight d6. Because we want to gain a tempo on this bishop. Black plays knight f6, which is not the theoretically best move. So white should be able to get some advantage in this position. Either with d4 or, I mean, even knight takes e5. But here, white plays a strange move. White plays this move.
Check.
Rook takes e5. So I'm not entirely sure why white played this move. Maybe thought that the knight was pinned or something. Maybe likes rooks, or maybe likes knights more than rooks. I'm not sure, but a rook is worth 5, a knight is worth 3, so you don't in general want to trade rooks for knights. So basically, white's just playing down the exchange for the rest of the game, unfortunately. But it's not over yet. Not over yet. So okay, take. A6. Okay, remember this is a tournament game, guys. This is a tournament game. So bishop c4. Okay, well, makes sense. Threatening stuff on f7. Okay, of course black can easily defend it, which he does with d5. Okay, queen e2. Interesting move. So what's the idea behind it? So, you know, you would think that white would simply defend the bishop, but what happens if black takes here? So if black takes, white actually can win the queen with knight c6. Check.
Check.
And notice that there's a check, and we're attacking the queen. And if black wants to try to save the queen by interposing, notice that this knight is still attacking the queen. So white was trying to be tricky with knight c6. Black was not going to have any of that, though, and so simply played queen e7. So now there's no discovery. Okay, white retreated bishop g4. So the point is this knight is actually pinned. So of course if knight takes bishop, then the queen hangs. So black's trying to make use of tactic in order to develop. Okay, so white plays queen e3. Black castles. So black has a little bit of a problem with developing this guy, but up the exchange shouldn't be any issues. Yeah, so notice that, I mean, white has a strongly posted knight on e5. Black's bishop on f8's a little hard to get out. This rook is also dead. But really, I mean, white's still down a full exchange, not even a pawn for it. So as long as black can eventually get his pieces out, white should be worse here. But again, easier said than done. So white plays knight c3. And now black is in a fervor to exchange pieces. So after c6, bishop d2, plays this move knight g4. So black's idea is just wants to initiate exchanges because black's up material, so exchanges are good for him. But there's a problem. What's the problem with knight g4? Well, the problem is all of a sudden all your pieces are hanging. So notice this king is on a bit of an unfortunate square. This bishop is on a bit of an unfortunate square. And this knight has been an unfortunate square. So you can take advantage of this by playing the move queen h3. And now all of a sudden we're hitting this, and this guy is pinned, so knight takes knight is illegal. Not a common tactic you see. But now actually white's winning because white wins a piece by force here. Simply threatening to take on h5, and if the bishop moves, just take on g4. So what did white do? Well, white played queen h3. So white's doing quite well now. Black plays f5. White takes the free piece. And now white is winning. Notice how white might be looking at potential ideas of not necessarily knight to f7, but maybe queen to f7, and then trade queens, and then after the knight takes, there'll be some sort of fork on d8 and h8. and also simply threatening to take on g4. And so white's minor pieces here far outweigh black's rook. So technically the material is a knight and a bishop for a rook, which is only slightly better for white, but because black's pieces are so poorly placed, white is almost completely winning. So here black takes on e5. Okay, what should white do here? What should white do here? So white has to take the knight, unfortunately, because queen takes f5
Check.
loses to knight d7, and rook e1 loses to queen f7. So you have to be careful. Have to take free pieces when they're available. Have to take free pieces when they're available. So it was a little bit of a trick. But yeah, normally you'd think, okay, rook e1, pin the knight. Okay, can't really move. If knight f3, just take. But notice queen f7, this queen's undefended, and I'm unpinning with a gain of tempo. And if you take my queen, I take with a knight. And now I've saved my material. And also, if queen takes f5,
Check.
notice that I'm in check, but I can move the knight and save my knight. So obviously correct would be simply to take back. But white tried to be clever and indeed
Check.
played queen takes f5. And now, of course, after knight d7, well, it's a bit tricky. Okay, so what should white do here? All hope is not lost. All hope is not lost. Yeah, because actually white can win material back again in this position with what move? Yeah, so white can actually win the exchange back with bishop g5. And now take on d8. But notice that white was up 2 pieces for a rook, and now at the end of this, white's just up a pawn. So 2 pieces for a rook is better than just being up a pawn. Especially in the position that white had, but okay. So white played bishop g5, queen e8, and now this rook is trapped, but if we don't take it immediately, then maybe bishop e7, although rook e1 would be pretty strong there. So, but taking it is probably correct. I mean, there's no really reason to wait. Okay, so king takes, g3. Okay, so white's giving himself Luft for his king. And here, as black, what should black try to play here? Down a pawn, but not the end of the world because, again, notice this bishop is a bit stuck. And it's going to take white a few moves to get that bishop back into the game. You know, white would have to play something like knight e2, c3, and bishop c2. So what should black be doing? So black really wants to develop this piece, but unfortunately, black can't immediately. Because if, say, bishop d6, now I have queen g5 check. And you either have to trade queens with me or give me this pawn. And notice that this pawn is actually not poisoned because I played g3, so no rook g8 ideas make sense. So what black has to do first is play this move king c7. And this looks odd because, you know, what's wrong with the king on d8? But the idea is to get out of this queen g5 check and also to play bishop d6 and then potentially to play rook f8 afterwards. But black needs to untangle his pieces because they're a bit uncoordinated at the moment. Okay, but black played c5, which can only be described as ghastly because not only are you giving up this d5 pawn, but now this bishop gets into the game with real force. And notice what file is going to be opened soon in the near future. Well, it's this one. What file is your king on? Well, it's the D file. So not in general the best idea. I mean, this pawn structure was actually doing a lot of good for black. This A7, A6, B7, C6, D5. It was really limiting white's bishop, but he kind of just ruined it. So after C5, knight takes D5, C takes D4, bishop A4 trying to get active on this diagonal. Makes sense. B5, okay, stopping it. Bishop B3, G6.
Check.
Queen G5, check. Bishop B7, okay. So, white to move and win. White to move and win. Very good. Queen F4. Good. So what's the threat? What the threat? Well, the threat is Queen C7 mate. And surprisingly, it's almost impossible to stop. So the only way to stop it is to create some sort of lift for the king. So say Queen F8. But now Queen C7 check, King E8. Now what should white play here? Yeah, simply rook E1. And this is catastrophic. I mean, black's losing at least a queen and a rook probably, if not getting mated anyway. So I mean, Queen C8, knight takes C7 is check. Then I can take on D7. You probably sacrifice your queen. I mean, it's just all sorts of bad. It's all kinds of bad. So this would probably win instantly. But white was like, well, let's just trade queens.
Check.
And go into an endgame. Because how many pawns do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many pawns do they have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 versus 5. Endgame. And whose pawns are better? Whites or blacks? Well, it's whites because of this guy. It's a problem. Whose minor piece is better? Whites or blacks? Bishop or the knight? Well, pawns on both sides of the board, so whites. So, white was perfectly correct to think this endgame was won. Unfortunately, you know, forcing mate is probably a little bit better, but okay. White wanted to exercise their endgame technique. Fair. I don't have any problems with that. But yeah, when you see a good variation, look for a better one, because you know, ending the game quicker is usually going to cause less problems.
Check.
Because unless white's endgame technique is impeccable, it's not going to be the easiest to win. Okay, so white just threatens to win a second pawn. Not much black can do about it. So 95. Okay, well, black's doing something about it, right? So what happens if rook takes pawn? Well, calamity happens. Knight takes f3. Knight f3. Okay, so thankfully white did not fall for these forks, because over the board, white's not going to fall for that. So white should play f4 here, and then on knight c4. Just take and rook d4, and if knight c6, then bishop d5, rook c8, and bishop e4 helps defend this square, and this should be good. And white's idea is just to bring his king up. Notice that really none of black's pieces can move. This rook is stuck to the knight's stuck to the pawn, the king really can't go anywhere useful. So this should be good for white. But it requires some technique still, so Okay, but white played rook e1 to pin it. Doesn't really help white, though, because black can just get his king forward while defending the knight. So king f6, rook e4, trying to attack the pawn, king f5. Okay, so obviously if rook d4, nothing's changed. Knight f3 is still in the position. So this pawn is not hanging.
Check.
So rook f4, king g5, king g2. Okay, so now you are threatening to take this pawn. Okay, rook d8 to defend, h4, king h6. Okay. So now this king is a bit off to the side, which is good for white. Now what should white play here? So the key in these endgames is to brighten the prospects for your pieces. And right now this rook isn't doing much, unfortunately. Sure, it's attacking this pawn, but black's rook is on a good natural active square to defend the pawn. And this rook is kind of bottled in otherwise. So we would like to improve its prospects. So rook f6 makes a lot of sense. And now on a move like, say, a5, now we can play rook b6. And now all of a sudden black's pawns are starting to fall. So if a4, we can play a move like bishop e6, and now this pawn is falling. Okay. But white instead played rook e4. So notice how the rook is not really doing so much. Knight c6. Okay. And now here, white can try a move like g4, just to make the king kind of boxed in. Try to deny the h5 square and force the king back. And there's also potential mating ideas. You know, if like you play like g5, king h5, you can play like c3 with the idea of bishop d1 or something. But okay, so h5. Okay, so what's the idea of this move? So is this a good move or a bad move? Yeah, it's actually a very good move. Because if pawn takes, well, first of all, there's this tactic that wins the knight. But even if this tactic didn't exist, this would actually still be progress for white, because what has been accomplished in this position? So yes, rook e6 does win a piece, but what has been accomplished more importantly, assuming that tactic did not exist? What has white gained from this position? Right. So notice that, okay, you're losing a pawn, but you're gaining something more important, which is this guy. So notice here, in this position, these two pawns are holding off these three. And the whole goal is to create a passed pawn here. So if you have to sacrifice a pawn to do it, it's not the worst thing in the world. Again, like I said before, rook e6 does win, but it's a good idea as well, just in general, to fracture this pawn structure in order to get a passed pawn. Okay, and what happens if king takes, by the way? Well, now we win our pawn back, and our rook becomes active. We play rook h4,
Check.
king g5, only legal move, and rook takes h7. Now the rook is doing good stuff on this 7th rank, and we've managed to exchange pawns, which is what we want to do because, again, it gets us that much closer to creating a passer. And also we have cute threats like if f4, king g4, we have like bishop e6 mate type ideas as well. And this is just good for us. Yeah, so h5 is actually a very good move. So, I mean, it's not even a sacrifice, but even if it were, it would be a very good one. So black just plays king g7, white takes on g6, black takes back. Okay, and now what should white play here? So again, we want to get this rook active. Rook e6. And if knight a5, so here's where it's important to know your rook endings. Because rook takes a6 is actually a mistake. It looks very natural, winning a pawn with a gain of tempo. But after knight takes b3, white's in a pickle. Because if white takes this way, white's actually losing. d3, d2, d1. Okay, so you guys might have noticed that and thought, okay, well, why can't I take this way? Well, you can, but after d3, again, I'm threatening d2, d1. So you pretty much have to take. Now after rook takes, all of a sudden I'm winning this pawn and defending this pawn simultaneously. And if you play rook a3, I always have b4. So this rook on b3 will be very strong. You'll have to play rook a2, and this is actually close to a draw because your rook is so passive on a2. And this 2 versus 1 is not going to mean anything if your rook is passive. So this rook ending is actually very close to a draw. So rook takes a6 is not the right move. But what is the right move is to play rook e7.
Check.
And then king moves somewhere, say, I don't know, say to f6 or something. Okay, well, if he moves to f6, you can play rook f7.
Check.
And then the king moves, say to g5, and now you play bishop e6. Now all of a sudden, there's mating ideas with f4 and rook h7. And this knight is now poorly placed. So rook e6 would be good, but f4, okay, fine. Rook f8, bishop d5, knight b4. Okay. So what should white do here? Well, in these bishop versus knight endgames, again, we want to dominate the knight. So how do we dominate the knight? Well, in this position is a little bit trickier, but we want the bishop on e4. So we simply play rook e7.
Check.
And if the king moves away, say to h8, now bishop e4 dominates the knight. And we're also threatening g6. And if king f6, then rook e6,
Check.
king has to go back to g7, and again, bishop e4 dominates the knight, and we're also threatening rook takes g6. So that would be the correct way. White instead played c3, and now problems. Now problems. Because what's happening? Well, don't forget. Don't forget. This guy's just hanging. Don't forget, the bishop's just hanging, guys. Knight b4 threatened the bishop. So, unfortunately, white forgot about it. Amazingly, so did black, though. Amazingly, so did black. But there's a problem here. There's a problem here. What's the problem? Yeah, so the problem is you can't take this because of c2. And unfortunately, there's no way to stop c1. because the rook cannot get back. And it queens on a dark square, so the bishop can't get back either. So what black is forced, or what white's forced to do is to play rook e7,
Check.
rook e6, and then bishop e4. But now after c takes b2, this is looking dangerous all of a sudden. So instead, white just obviously didn't see the bishop once, didn't see the bishop twice. And now again, black has knight takes bishop, but oh no, knight d3. Well, I can't explain why black didn't take this piece, but now white's better again, just rook e7, rook e6. Rook d4 is okay, but not as good as rook e7, rook e6.
Check.
Knight e1, king f2, knight c2, rook d2, knight a3. This knight's hopping all over the place. Bishop b7 to attack this pawn. a5, king f3, knight c4,
Check.
rook d7, king f6. Okay. So now what should white do? Yeah, notice by the way that move was move 39. And this was over the board, so it's very possible that black and white both had less than a minute or so. So it's very possible this is time pressure, but now they're in time control, so. Yeah, and also sometimes it's just the fact of believing your opponent. Okay, so what should white do here? Well, white should play bishop d5 here. The point is, we're threatening to simply take this knight, and this rook ending is actually 1 for white, because this rook is so good. And notice that this rook is now in zugzwang, because if it moves, rook f7 is mate. And this knight doesn't really have too many good squares left. So all of a sudden, all of black's pieces are kind of tied down. And this bishop is doing a great job on d5. But bishop a6. And now what should black play here? Brilliant idea. Black actually wins here. Black has a simple fork.
Check.
And white can resign. Because if take,
Check.
then check. Very cute idea. Check. And we win the rook. So, of course they both missed that. Okay, rook b8. And now white's doing quite well again. Rook d5, knight a3 to defend the pawn, c4. Okay, so is this a good move or a bad move? Yeah, it's actually a very nice move. Very nice move. So the point is if knight takes c4, we're simply taking on b5. And if pawn takes c4, we play rook takes a5. And now after knight b1, careful now. Careful. Because we can't take here because of this. Careful. Tricky knights, but what does white play here? Yeah, white simply plays rook c5, and now white's winning. Because if c3, now bishop d3. Now I'm just going to take here, and this rook ending is 1. So bishop d3 is important to stop c2, but once we stop c2, we're going to win that pawn by force. So the rook ending is 1 for us. So that would be good. So instead, black played knight takes, and then after bishop takes, which is good, knight b6.
Check.
Rook d6. Okay. Okay. What can white play here? What can white play here? Bishop to d3. That's a check. You guys are all wrong though. It's g4 mate.
Checkmate.
So you guys cannot put on your dunce caps. Bishop d3 is wrong. g4 is the right move. So checkmate is better than anything you can possibly say. What happened in the game? Well,
checkmate.
White obviously played the inferior move, but somehow managed to be victorious nevertheless. So I can't really complain too much. Win equals win, but